Okay, so hi all of you two people who showed up here for our workshop. Um, well, maybe just like introduce us for like 10 seconds. So we're Gireesh and I'm Anna, and we work on Node Core, and we are two of the people who try to answer questions in the Node.js/help repository on GitHub. And so that is kind of the idea of this workshop here, trying to find people who might have issues with Node.js and help them get answers to their questions. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Anna. So for me, this is first of its kind event that's happening. So please feel free to provide any feedback in terms of the expectations, if it is not matching in terms of the content or in terms of the details and things like that. We can always improve on that. But for me, what is most important is for the Node.js ecosystem, we have a set of folks who are working on programs, who are end users, customers, who want to learn Node.js and things like that on one side. And then we have people who are on a daily basis working on the Node.js core, who are familiar with the APIs, who are defining the abstractions and looking at the gap in the abstractions, and who are familiar with the code at the API level, at the code level, at the design level, and even at the machine instruction level. So combining these two groups together, the whole idea is to make having meaningful conversations and make the Node.js user experience a better one. So that's the whole idea. That's the whole intent. So in that perspective, I think we are doing the right thing. So please feel to share the feedback, if any.
Right. So yeah, since there's only like less than a handful of people here who attend, I would suggest that well, if you like that we start by asking you like, do you have any issues or any questions about Node.js that you brought with you that you want to ask? And don't be shy because you're not taking up anybody else's talking time. Do you? Okay, so do you think that that is something that we could like discuss in a verbal form, or would we need to look at your code? Or I'm just having this here, so
verbal,
it's for the recording.
Well, yeah.
Okay, yeah, then
verbal.
If you want to take this,
I don't know if you guys can show anything on the screen, or like, do you have a browser you can go to things?
Yeah,
or?
sure. Like you could open a browser, right?
I feel like I'm in charge here now. So.
Yeah, you kind of are, because you've got the mic.
I currently have an application where it's passing the IDs through the URL address bar, and I don't really want that for a number of reasons.
Right, so like as a like a parameter behind the question mark and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like something you'd usually want.
Security reasons and just ugliness.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know who the person in this room with like the most express experience would be, but
yeah, I guess it's not a Node.js specific question.
Well, I mean, Express is Node.js specific, but yeah, we have the time to figure it out. Like, actually, we do. I mean, like, at least for me, it's like very unfortunate that I don't really get to do application development anymore. Like I'm just working on Node Core.
So you want to open some specific GitHub issue or something?
I don't have it deployed online, but I have the code.
Do you have the code somewhere online?
Yeah, I have it in GitHub actually.
Yeah.
As long as everybody doesn't make fun of my code.
No, we won't, promise.
Feel free to recommend other other ways of doing anything though.
So, a few basics I know of the session module is that you have a session which is highly configurable, which you construct at the time of the program beginning,
Right.
and then that returns a middleware which gets invoked in your route before the actual user callback gets called. Right. And then you have a couple of APIs for the session like save, resave, and things like that. Right. And then you have the backend where the session gets stored, which is highly customizable.
Yep.
The databases and other projects can implement their own session stores. Session basically is an interface.
Yep.
And then we have seen few issues coming from the session repo in terms of the session not getting persisted when you are redirecting the URL. And sometimes the session gets deleted across the routes.
Okay.
So,
yeah, it all makes sense in theory, but I guess I don't know.
So, I mean, which category your problem comes in? Is it like session not persisting or something like that?
No, it like he explained it. It's like the session is transferred as a parameter in the URL.
Yeah.
As a request parameter.
Yeah, it's just a parameter that I pass.
Cookie or something, right?
What's that?
It's a cookie, probably.
Yeah, I want to eliminate passing the ID in the address bar and use the session to contain that ID so I can use it anywhere in the application.
So I don't think the session ID is passed as part of the URL.
No. Yeah, that's what I don't want to do.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually had a working, semi-working solution where I I create the session in the application when it starts up. And I can get some pages working, but from the start to the end, I'm having problems with the flow.
So are you using the Express.js session module?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at at their documentation, and they basically only talk about cookies, but you seem to be more familiar with it anyway. But yeah, if you could share your code, maybe that would actually be a good starting point.
Okay. Let me see here what I have. It's not the right repository. I actually just rolled it back because I'm going to use it in a branch, but let me see here. Okay. Is there any way I can share this, or you just want to look at my GitHub? Code base.
You can spell it if you want.
Yep, it's ADENAD.
Is that right?
D. EAU. And that's it. If I go there, you'll see my repositories.
Yeah, that looks like you.
Oh, shoot. Oh, it's not public right now. Just a minute here.
new repo public. It's not your repo?
It's my project with the code in it and everything. No, sorry.
Okay.
That's the only public one that I have there right now. I'm trying to make this one public. If I spell it right, that would be better.
Yeah.
Okay, should be that one right there, yeah.
Okay, that looks like it has quite a bit of code.
So if you go into the app startup file.
App.js?
Yeah. You'll see, if you scroll down a little bit.
Yeah, there's express session, definitely. Yeah.
And then down there, that's where a session is created. I copied that out of some example I found. So if you go to the user route in a different, if you go back up a level.
Back up.
Like back up in the repository.
Oh, yeah, different.
My routes in users. And if you scroll down to login, right there. Is there anything down below? Okay, so there I'm trying to set if the passwords match, that log the user in and put their session as the user ID. So then I go to the profile page it's called, and right now when it works I have the URL or the ID on the end of the profile folder there where the redirect is going. It's actually not a redirect, it's just a response, and it sends it to that page, or it responds and sends the forwards onto the actual JavaScript that's on the page, jQuery. So that's it.
Okay, so it's just a wild guess, and you might correct me if I'm wrong. But in the session setup code, you had like in the call to what express-session return.
Yeah.
There was like a key option that was set that I'm not finding in the documentation, and that kind of sounds like that. Might be.
When I created the session. Or
when you're setting up the session middleware,
yeah,
in the app.js, I think that I like the first thing I would try is deleting that line, maybe seeing what happens. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, right. There's this key user SID thing, and I can't find that in the documentation. I don't know if this where that comes from, but is that what does this user SID thing show up in your URL?
No.
Okay.
I may have put that in after I may have changed that. Let me look back at the previous version.
So just for my understanding, is the problem you're describing is the session value which you saved in the dash profile route is not visible in the second redirect? Is that the problem statement?
Yes. When I go to the profile route, I guess you could call it down further.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just halfway through it. I kind of am confused.
So ideally, the session object gets persisted between the redirects.
Right.
But we have seen many issues on that line. One known issue which is related to some race conditions, is that suppose a scenario where you have a session store which is a remote machine, like a MongoDB or whatever, which is across the network, and then the contract with the session API is that every time you send the response back to the client, that's the time the session gets stored automatically to the session store. Now, the response go to the client, the session go to the session store, right? These are two separate network requests. Now, what if the client comes back with the second request immediately, meaning back-to-back second request, which assumes that your session is already persisted and is available in the server in its modified form. But then there is a round-trip network latency that's involved, and depends on the proximity of the session store with respect to the client machine and all other network latency complexities involved. Right. It's so possible that the session is not really stored into the session store, and when the client comes back for the second time, you actually get the old value of the session.
Right. Okay. So I have tested it on a few pages, and it is storing the ID in the session.
Okay.
So do you have a working example, or maybe we could pull one up online?
Let me see. So the best practice around working with the session stores, yes, which are remote as opposed to a memory store, is to explicitly save the session, like session.save, and then send the response to the client only in the callback of the session method, so that when the callback is triggered, you are guaranteed that the session is actually persisted in the store.
Right.
Let me see if I can figure out find an example.
The problem locally?
Yeah, that might actually be very helpful.
Thanks for asking. You're under pressure. I don't know if this would be appropriate to ask here, but like maybe once we're done with this or at some another point, would you guys be able to answer any questions around like just a brief what's happening with ESM modules? Like I know that they just got removed from the flag, but I'm basically confused about what the future of ESM and Node and what, you know, how all that's going to work. Or yeah, okay.
Yeah, like I can definitely give some kind of update.
Yeah, just any color. I mean, I don't. Yeah. I'm just curious if you guys have any. That's a question that like confuses a lot of my friends, and I feel like I understand what's happening, but I don't. Yeah. I don't think I do very well.
So like for the TSC panel tomorrow, like we did practice runs, and like we actually kind of are at like 5 to 10 minutes question time from the audience, and like. I feel like ESM might deserve a bit more. Yeah.
Okay. So here is an example code for your reference. I can walk you through this. First, let's look at the client side. This is the client side code. In the app.listen callback, I start one client, which is accessing the main route. And in the callback of the first request, I am making a second request. So just to make sure that both the requests get the proper session object reflected in that. Now, if you look at the server code, you create a session here where no save uninitialize is set to false, resave is set to false, and a max age of 1 minute. The default route, I create a session object and set the views to some value, and then send the response. But if it is not the default case, that it's not for the first time, I increment the session and add some extra value to the session. This is only done in the second time onwards. And instead of simply redirecting to the next route, which is here, I do it, basically I do an explicit save. And then in the callback, I do the redirection. At this point, line number 29, it's guaranteed that whatever the session store implementation is, a database or memory store or whatsoever, at this point, the session is actually persisted. So then when you actually land upon the admin route, you actually get the latest value. So maybe something you can try this. Yeah.
But like, so maybe just to clarify, like, is the issue that the session key shows up in the URL, or is it that, you know, the session is not always persisted?
I don't have an issue. It's not showing up in the URL. That's how I have it set up now, because I was
Okay.
new to Node and I just was passing IDs, and now afterwards I want to go back and update it to use a session.
Okay.
So I'm halfway through that, though. I just wanted to see like an example of how you guys would accomplish it and the best way to do that, the most efficient way. Right.
Yeah.
But that makes sense. Maybe I just need to put more time into it.
So one of the other thing you can do is enable the debug mode. So right now, if you run, say, the program, it just runs like this. But if you say export debug is equal to express session, I guess. Probably we need to get the client as well. 12,000. Yeah. So as you can see, most of the Express modules, including the session, have a lot of debug statements sprinkled across the vital control flow points. That means to say the life cycle of the session, when it is getting persisted, when it is recreated, and things like that. So they print a very useful debug message. So the only thing you need to do is, before starting, just export this.
Right. Yeah.
And you get very good information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that gives me some information to go with. So
Sure.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, does that mean like you want to like see if that helps you, and maybe later we can come back to you if it doesn't? Or
I'll try something after the session, and if I have any issues, maybe I can find you guys.
yeah, you can. You can also open issues on the GitHub Node.js/help repository.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the inspiration for this kind of thing here, and like you can ask any question there if you have any.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool.
Thank you.
So about ES modules. So my current understanding, so like the feature is still considered experimental, but the flag has been removed. There are still experimental flags for some sub features. Like I think like the VM part, like in the VM module of Node.js, the part that is concerned with modules, or I think the loader is still experimental too, like the loader API. So like for the hard issues, I don't think there have been any like real super good solutions. Like you, at this moment, you cannot require ES modules from CommonJS. And somebody opened a PR yesterday that would do that, but that basically wouldn't work in. Yeah, it would like require some very hacky things that you should generally not do in Node.js. And yeah, so that's tricky. Like partially because of ESM supporting things like top-level await. You know, like ESM execution can be asynchronous, and well, it requires synchronous, and that kind of just doesn't match up. And that PR kind of like hacks around that in some ways that you should not do. The other way around, like importing CommonJS from ES modules, that works, but only for the default export. and there are some, like, I don't think there's a really good way around that right now. I think the most like the solution that the modules team is going for, as I understand it, is for now that you can create some kind of wrapper module that is in ESM and that loads that common.js file and then re-exports everything. Which, you know, I guess that works well enough. There are some features being added to package.json that are very relevant here. So for one, there's a type flag that can be set to module or I don't know, I guess something else, but not module. And the type flag would tell you that, like, if it is type module, then .js files are going to be interpreted as ESM. So like that is the solution for not having to use .mjs. Again, as I understand it, I'm not part of the module team. I just like try to observe what they do and have strong opinions about that I try to not express because that gets frustrating. I don't know what else is there with ESM.
So to frame it, because a lot of people are really used to using, so for example, like create React app. Obviously, you get to use import export syntax currently, but that's because it's being transpiled by Babel and Webpack. So I find a lot of people are confused when I tell them that, like, no, Node doesn't support import export syntax, aka ESM currently. So the effort that the module team is working on, that's specifically to get native support in Node.js of ESM without requiring transpilation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fair to say that
there's currently experimental support, which is why there's been a flag, etc.
That's why it started with the flag. The flag was because with other experimental features that were discovered, people don't. So we now have like a sort of we usually have a two-step flag, which has a small number.
So do you know much about what Babel is doing in terms of, it looks like we're using ESM currently, but I assume that, because I can import common JS modules, it's doing a transpilation in the background, etc. So we're not currently even using real ESM. Like, are people publishing ESM? Is there a standard that we've agreed on for MJS currently? Or is that all the work that's happening?
It's all work. I would say there's a lot of stuff that's been agreed upon. There's a lot of stuff. It's hard to know what's going on. However, there's only one person to ask about that stuff. They're here. Anything to that?
No, yeah, but like more specifically to your question, like my understanding is that Babel does support ESM, like in a spec compliant way, but the spec leaves some options open for what the implementation does. And so one of the main issues, and that I'm really unhappy about, that we didn't find a solution so far, at least not that everybody's happy with, is that what Babel does and what Node currently does are not compatible. Like, you don't have named imports from common.js, for example. And I think in terms of what Babel actually does, I think it transpiles to something that essentially is require and then works on top of that. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it does.
Again, like probably.
Yeah.
But my impression, Babel compiles very close. Spec compliant. Without support yet, do 100% matter. It turns out. But I don't actually. And there's actually 3 other people.
Yeah. I think there's also like a talk on that topic, like Gus, you mean? And Guy, Gus and Guy, yeah.
I'm happy to hear that it is complicated and it is being worked on, because that's what it's felt like to me so far, is that it's I don't fully grasp it.
So we're 5 minutes over, just so you know. And we
We're
have
not.
we have until 11:30. And the talk starts at 11:40.
No.
The session has time till
Never mind, we have
12:50.
5 more minutes. Go ahead.
12:50 actually.
We have 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
Like the mobile version of the schedule is very confusing, but
Yes.
because it doesn't show you the
Oh.
times of the talks, just when they start.
Gosh, terrible. Okay. Never mind. We have tons of time. Tons of time. Keep going.
That's cool. I'm happy to, like I said, to talk to you guys about it. I'll track down Miles and I'll maybe ask the TSC panel.
Yeah.
But as like
Okay.
as a consumer of of Node.js, this has been really confusing to me in terms of like what I'm going to have to end up doing in order to change the JavaScript I write, or if I need to. But it sounds like as of today we're still using Babel, etc. But the module group is working hard to smooth out issues so that we can use it natively sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And so like I looked it up. The talk is tomorrow at 3:40 p.m. Miles is giving it, and it's about ES modules.
Thank you.
Sure. I hope this was helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adrian.
Yeah, I think so. I'm still Anna. Yeah. Yeah, we've definitely met before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh, sorry? I mean, so like the schedule says this one has time until 12:50. But like, I mean, like, depending on what we end up doing here, we might cut it early, I guess.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So this is your code. Did you share? Oh, yeah, right. Okay. Any other questions? I mean, like, if you have any other questions about how Node.js works, like, this would be the time, but yeah.
I'm just wondering, we should wait till 12 o'clock or so, because when the morning session and 12 o'clock is 11 o'clock session, and some people may come in, hopefully.
Sure, we can do that, but I wouldn't count on it. Like, I wouldn't expect a lot of people to show up. Partially because of how the schedule looks online.
Yeah.
Yes, there is. This is just like, so it's on the recording,
Okay,
you know?
Sure. So I don't have anything specific, but my workflow is primarily GraphQL. So I wonder if there's any recommendations, best practice, working with TypeScript using Node.js, and maybe like ESLint. we recently transitioned from TSLint to ESLint, and that's another thing. Just wondering best practices and just general things that I think if you have run into it, you have some opinion about.
I don't know, do you?
Unfortunately, I don't have much insight onto the TypeScript.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm also like in the unfortunate position that I've never actually used TypeScript for anything. And I really wish I personally would love to have that in Node Core at this point, because it would definitely have caught a few bugs early. But yeah, I don't really think I like. I mean, like, so the thing is, like, if you run into issues that TypeScript has specifically with Node, then feel free to reach out to us, and like, I would always be curious to see like how we can improve things for TypeScript users. But like Node itself, it only kind of compiles whatever the user sends it, and in the TypeScript case, that's already transpiled TypeScript. So usually it doesn't really affect us, I think. Yeah. You can still ask them. So like the current Streams API version is 3, yes. But like I mean like they all exist at the same time. Like it's somewhat backwards compatible. Streams 1 was basically just emitting events, like emitting data events on a stream. I think that was pretty much it. Like no internals in any way. Like whatever implemented that interface was Streams. And Streams 2 was like the thing that actually most people use at this point. Just like having .write and .on data, but like with a lot of internal machinery that takes care of things like buffering and like converting strings and buffers, stuff like that. And Streams 3 added like .read, which is kind of a different paradigm. Like it allows doing pull streams instead of push streams. But I don't see many people using that in practice because .on data is still kind of very useful. And there are some things being worked on. Like Jeremiah Sengpiel is working like at fishrock123 is his handle. And he's working, or he had been working on a replacement Streams API that would kind of be more low level and have less overhead. Like one of the things that's annoying about Node.js core streams is that they do have some overhead that wouldn't be necessarily in an ideal world, but the API kind of requires it at this point. And what he's working on is kind of like trying to be more low level and provide something nicer for people who want it. Yeah, that's Bob Streams, yeah. And I mean, like, there's also always the option of like eventually implementing WG streams in Node at some point.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I'm not an SME in the streams, but my perspective, probably outsider's view to the streams, is that Node.js is possibly the first platform or language which has the streams implemented at the language API level itself, which works well with the asynchronous event-driven programming model. Other languages like C++ or Java, .NET, etc. will have this as an additional capability, not fused into the semantics. So because of that, it's an added advantage, but the drawback is we don't have a specification around the lifecycle events of the stream. Whether the close should be called after the destroy should be called before the end. Those conversations are happening in an endless manner, and that adds up to a bad use experience. So probably one of the things we should be looking at is not necessarily a new implementation which outperforms the existing one. We should freeze on the spec or the protocol, what should be the lifecycle event. And I guess Node.js is best place to come up with a spec on that than other languages.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I like you probably also have seen, like we have a collaborator, or not yet collaborator, but probably, hopefully soon, who did a lot of work around streams over the last month. And like he opened so many issues on the Node core repo that were all about like, ordering of lifecycle events, or like, just like figuring out what the actual edge cases are, what the interactions of the different parts of streams are. Is there's so many unanswered questions at this point with the current API.
Yeah.
I also I find it super interesting that there's this pattern that like a lot of Node.js features eventually end up being provided by browsers at some point, but like in a very different and kind of clearer manner. Like for example, buffers, which eventually became uint8 arrays and stuff like that, or Node string decoder, which browsers provide as text decoder now, and streams. I feel like WG streams are a nicer, more like well-defined API.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Training or anything, so I'm here on my own. After I get the session variables working, I don't have anything in there for security currently. So I don't know if any of you guys know the best way to proceed. I haven't even searched around, to be honest. I just am looking for some early guidance on how to properly and most beneficially do that within my Node.js application.
I mean, security is like a very big topic, right?
Right. So can you just explain the different types of security there is, or the individual components, if you say it's complex or it's large? A quick overview, or is that too high level for this workshop? Yes, yeah, I have no, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Also, for running Express, it's probably a good idea to put it behind.
Right.
Two things.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, at high level, I would say that Node.js web app, being in the backend, being always serving services, is centrally located in terms of the security vulnerabilities. But at the same time, when it comes to the security posture, we have to look at two aspects. One is, what is the type of your application? Are you trusting everything that the program contains? For example, the program at high level would contain your application, the routes and other things, and NPM modules, and the Node.js APIs itself, and the underlying system and kernel and things like that. This is the whole web app stack.
Yeah.
Now, what is the trust that is established between these stack modules? There are, I guess, there were huge discussions that happened in 2017 Node.js Interactive. Should we trust the NPM modules or shouldn't we? If you don't trust the NPM modules, then we need to implement the security constraints right in the runtime itself. But if you trust the NPM modules, like put proper security audits and proper reviews and things like that, then the default security constraints that is available in the runtime applies across the board. All the JavaScript modules come under the purview of that, and then then you just need to worry about the other vulnerabilities which are available in the networking session, like the cross-site scripting, the session hijacking, and things like that.
Right.
I guess the default behavior or the default implementation of all the Express and its submodules have very good security coverage in terms of the web app security.
Okay.
So that boils down to the runtime security alone, in my opinion.
Right. Okay.
So the current standpoint, or the current way the Node.js app works, is taken for granted that the modules, NPM modules, and your own application and the Node.js API all work together in conjunction. There is no difference between each of these things from the virtual machine perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
I guess you try to implement a whole security layer in between the APIs and the user modules.
Yeah, but that didn't happen, or at least not yet. Anyway, like you mentioned something. Do you mind if I like?
Yeah, sure. Please use.
So. I'm gonna, if I can find it, plug somebody else's talk here. If I can find it online. Anyway, like I was at a conference like earlier this year where there was a great talk about HTTP headers and how they affect security. Maybe they have a link to their YouTube channel here or something. If not, then not. I don't know. He was the dude that gave the talk. And okay, yeah, I don't know. Anyway. Okay, yeah. Anyway, like there's a lot of HTTP headers that are concerned with things like security. And like since you mentioned cross-site scripting, like if that is one of your concerns, then there's always measures that you can take to mitigate this, like reduce the seriousness of this attack vector. And like, I don't know, there's probably good resources on the relevant HTTP headers out there too.
Right.
What was it? HTTP headers?
Maybe. Yeah. It might have been that. Yeah. But it also, like, it was a great talk, which is why I'm plugging in.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
One other thing which I think the Express or any middleware component can improve on is to document the security implications of different usage of the modules. For example, if your application is not redirecting or not making use of the session, then the session hijacking is not coming into the picture. Maybe for people who are well understood in the art, it might become trivial. But for a new programmer or an application, normal application programmer, these kinds of mapping really helps a lot. For example, what is the nature of your application? What are the kind of things you are doing with respect to the client server or the web app transactions? And what are the vulnerabilities that is subjected for this type of transaction? That mapping would really help.
Yeah, so I see I'm just on the Node security page, and it says that you can report third-party module bugs to the security working group repository, HackerOne.
Yeah.
So has anybody ever had problems with third-party Node modules or modules, third-party modules? I mean, not anybody in the world, but like in your guys' experience, anyone?
I mean, like, I'm not seeing the H1 reports for that, but I know that there have been reports, and I mean, like, I know that there have been like very public cases of npm packages being used to do evil things. Mm-hmm. But it's the same with Python and the same with other repositories too.
Right.
So.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Should we call it a day? Or?
Yeah. My mic keeps falling off, so that might be a sign from the universe. Well, then, thank you all for coming. And yeah. And again, if there's anything else, like anything you need help with, then there's the Node.js/help repository for that. And yeah.
Yep. Thank you so much.